Welcome everyone back. Now we'll start with the first panel of the day. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Pramod Varma to take it forward. Pramod, hand it to you.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I hope everyone is having a great time. Definitely afternoon session can be quite tough, but we have a power-packed panel. And the topic, if we don't talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and real learning, then we are missing something. So we have to have this panel. And we have to have the best people working in this area, especially with respect to combining learning and AI. And I am privileged to have 4 of my friends, colleagues, people who have worked in this domain, specifically working on AI and ML techniques in the learning domain on this panel today. You don't want to be missing this session. So let me start introducing each of them. We have Dr. Vivek Raghavan. Many of you may have heard of him from earlier Aadhaar experience, India Stack experience. He's been leading many of the activities in the country, built national population scale system. One thing I can tell you, if I have anything, any complex question that I need answer to, that's a guy to go to. Okay, it's one of the best brains I have come across. So Vivek, welcome, privileged to have you here.
Yeah, thanks to be here. Really excited to be here.
And we have Umakant Soni, and I came across him. I sort of heard about him, but came across him a couple of years ago. And his dream was not small. Okay, he had set himself putting a dream of building AI for 6 billion, while Silicon Valley builds for the first billion. Someone else has to build for everyone else, empowering everyone else. And the best part is he's not just talks. He is actually a guy who will pull magic off and build real large-scale institution around it and make things happen. And he is on a journey, and he's the co-founder of AI Foundry, recently built Artpack. I'll let him subsequently ask questions related to that. In IAS, he built specifically looking at AI and Bharat and how it can power 1 billion people. Welcome, Umakant. Pleasure to have you here.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for the generous introduction. But yeah, equally excited to be here. And I think what I'm hearing about Sunbird today, I think it's really interesting and fascinating. And I think we can definitely, if not for the other areas, I think education is in it. I think it's a kind of a game changer for our country. If we are able to double or triple our potential, each one of us, I think we'll reach 10 trillion. So I think this is exciting to be actually part of this session.
Yeah, wonderful to have you here. And Thiru, I know Thiru, head of research and education, all of training, but he is not training small children. He's training people like us. And he's training 250,000 people around the world in Infosys, employees, partners who are at our levels. So that's hard. We are old, right? We can't be trained. So it's hard to train older people. But he's actually taken on that challenge. He's been doing it brilliantly. But not only that, he's been one of the first adopters of Sunbird. And he truly leveraged Sunbird, even at when 1.5 version. And he took it, built the entire learning environment for 250,000 people. Now he's extending that for probably 1 million other users through his large enterprise customer. So very different background, enterprise, adult learning background. And they're applying AI techniques and ML techniques there very well. I know some part of it. So Thiru, pleasure to have you here.
Thanks so much, Pramod, and it's great to be part of this panel.
Thank you. And we have one of our early AI architects of Sunbird himself, Dr. Soma, and he's been with us actually early days, building the early parts of when we didn't even know AI, ML. Frankly, we were all using the buzzword, listening to it, but he's one of the best mentors and teachers I have come across. And he does a fantastic job of building some of that into Sunbird. So I'll have him answer some of that question. But now he's currently at Wadhwani AI. He's a principal scientist there. And pleasure to have Soma. Always a pleasure to have you.
Wonderful. It's a pleasure and honor to be in this panel. Thank you for the opportunity.
And you know Sunbird like anybody else. So yeah. I'm going to have you some good questions there.
Sure.
Okay. So I'll start, Vivek, I'll start with you. As part of, you have been speaking about Indian languages. That's been in your mind for a while. And you have been actually talking about how we could, and a lot of us actually built only Google can solve these problems. But you have been actually telling us, no, that's not the case at all. We could absolutely build Indian languages, translation, Indian languages, voice recognition for children, early childhood learning, for example, speech to text, text to speech, and so on. And of course, you have seen the national education policy specifically talking about mother tongue and language, influence of language in learning. And you have been open sourcing every one of that work you are doing. So thank you for that. I'm very sure community will appreciate that. Can you speak about the project, Anuvada project, that speech project, translation project specifically? What have you learned? Where have you reached? Is it at the same quality as Google? I'm going to put you on the dock. And I want you to talk about that. And because if that's the open source, the community who is listening to you right now will be elated. And please talk to us. What is your finding?
Yeah. So I think it's been an interesting journey. So about maybe probably a year and a half, I've been looking at this idea to actually use some of these AI techniques that the world is really progressing at a dramatic rate in various kinds of language technologies, and try to use these open source things. And now the interesting starting point is almost all of the code is open source. Therefore, there's new things that are becoming available there that you can use and actually train new things. And that's the exciting part, that research which was there 6 months or even 3 months ago, you can actually come up with take advantage of it and use it to build things. The second part, obviously, with AI is always data. And data was the challenge. Actually, if you look at Indian languages, there are basically 2 or 3 different categories of data that was there. One was that, there was that, obviously the big tech, because we all use their product, we help train their tool, that's one class of people. The second class of people was the kind of, was people who are having, small companies and stuff like that. They had small amounts of data really captured in silos. And because, many of these companies, at least the first wave of AI companies, seem to think that the data was their USP, right? So they were trying to keep that as a mechanism. As a result, they're not even, they're not able to be able to collaborate with each other, let alone with anything else. So therefore, I said, looking at these 2 things, I said, we need to just try to do something to change the ground, and let's try to create systems with both which actually implement open source, tune open source to Indian languages, and create open data. Mm-hmm. This is the fundamental principle, whether it was language, which is translation, or whether it was speech, or even OCR kinds of things. So there are a whole bunch of areas where we are looking at looking at this language problem, putting these solutions, solutions that work quite well, out into the open source, and then kind of see what. And actually, I was originally drawn into this with a problem from the courts. Actually, that the judicial system, they wanted to actually do some translations and things like that, and of judgments and other things. And they said, can we do something? And actually, that was the very beginning when we got started there. But the exciting part is all the architectures are there. Everything is available. If you are clever about how you get the data, and I think we've figured out quite a few interesting techniques here to actually create large amounts of data. And by the way, all of those are open source. There's nothing that our entire pipelines on whatever we do is open source. Therefore, in the end, even we do it for something. So therefore, we open source the pipelines, we open source the data, which means that if you have a better model, please use the data and make a better model. And that's how, you know, we can progress. Because languages are too fundamental. These belong to all of us, right? They do not belong to any corporation, or they don't belong to and so and of course basically the pipelines, you know, all the utilities that we have, we are open sourcing the data itself, and we are also open sourcing the models. That is, the models are freely available for people to use, and you know, so we have obviously So among that, so right now we've actually built translation models in the Anubad project. We've built translation models for 9 Indian languages that are actually available. And these are actually an instance of this is being used by the Supreme Court of India and all the high courts to actually translate various judgments and orders. And also there is an open source, there is an open implementation of that at users.anubad.org. So people can go and upload their documents and translate it and do whatever they want. And it's interesting thing is not just it's actually a document to document translation system. Yeah. So therefore you can do lots of interactive things. You can actually, you know, kind of finish. Machine translation, the fact is today is you can't do 100% translation. 90% translation you can do. The remaining you have to correct. And how effectively and efficiently. And we built a bunch of interesting features to actually, you know, to improve the efficiency of doing that translation. So it's actually available from English to 9 Indian languages, and from 9 Indian languages to English. These models exist. We are also going to be releasing the largest parallel data corpuses in 9 languages. This is part of the work, you know, as part of this process, we have collected this data and we've made this available. And the intent is to contribute actually. And there is a whole bunch of utilities, which are basically alignment utilities, various kinds of things that if anybody wants to start and do a project in translation involving Indian languages, maybe domain specific, they can actually start from either, you know, use our pipelines, they can use our data sets, or they can use our models, or they can even checkpoint our models and continue and improve it in a domain specific manner. So the intent is to make it free, available for anybody, whether you're a, you know, obviously, you know, given my background, there is certain interest to use it in various government applications, but anybody who wants to use it for any kind of application are free to. I mean, it's MIT license, so you can do whatever you want with it. Okay, wonderful. So that's something on the translation. On the speech, it's actually a little bit more recent effort, but it's again, the concept is very similar. So again, these architectures, and this is here, we've actually seen these architectures rapidly coming out, you know, better and better speech models are rapidly coming out. The code is open source. Indian languages are some of the worst languages for having public data in them. And so we've actually so we've done lots of clever things, and we've scraped together thousands of hours of data in number of Indian languages, which is actually available for these kinds of
you have open source them.
And I mean, we are with the intention to open source. It will be open source in a couple of months. Okay. You know, one of the things that about open sourcing, which we also realize, is that it needs to be good enough, right? To make sure that everything's been vetted and everything's there. But 100% the intent is to open source. And the same thing, we've built a whole bunch of pipelines, which are including, like, you know, speaker identification, language identification models, you know, kind of identifying music, noise removal. All these, again, pipelines have actually been created. And literally in 6 months, we have built models for at least five or six Indian languages. And these are actually, it's interesting that when you use the state of the art, and in both of these, I think the question you had asked, Google versus this thing, you know, it's difficult to make a fair comparison. But I think that if people try it out, I think most people say that, you know, this is as good, if not better than Google. So therefore so I mean, you know, I don't want to say that Google has used much more resources and many different techniques than what we may have used. But I think that in benchmarks that we have run, I think that, you know, we see that Definitely, it is, most of the benchmarks show that we are better, but that we'll see. I'll let the world decide that rather than what we're doing. So that's, so it's interesting that basically what we want to create is to create an environment by saying that these things like speech and language and OCR and other things, they are not some magical things that only the big players can do. We can actually sit by, and for our languages, which we need to own, we can build. And if we actually create this as a movement where people, and the other part in speech especially, we feel that some of the latest techniques have enabled us to go to extremely low resource languages. So, tribal languages, these kinds of languages, everywhere we think we can build really high quality speech tools quite fast. I mean, we're talking, when we talk about a language, so therefore our goal is to actually templatize this problem. So for example, in speech, I want to say from start to end, how many days do I take to build a speech model? That's really the kind of, and I think we are at less than a month right now. I think that we can actually get faster than that. But the intent is, what we are doing is just an example. We want to actually get everybody involved because these are all our languages.
Absolutely.
And we should do something about that.
Very
so
much.
That's just a nutshell of the kinds of things that...
Very, very inspiring, Vivek. And, your call for participation, call for contribution towards nobody else is going to deal with tribal languages and less used languages other than us. And you are giving a very encouraging view that given the open source nature of the technologies, less than a month, maybe month, 2 months, we are able to build very successful models for speech and translation for our languages by participation from the open source community at large. It's wonderfully inspiring and actually quite, we feel like we can do and we will do. So, and the fact that you're open sourcing the data and the model and the entire pipeline is amazing. So thank you for doing it. I will go to Umakant, and I want to start you with, and as I introduced you, you are on a journey to enable Bharat AI, and AI for Bharat and AI beyond Bharat, and how do India become an AI superpower? I think you had a very larger view of the whole thing, and you helped, you were part of that track with Niti Aayog, putting out the AI strategy for the country, and you have been working with bringing the whole ecosystem to set up high quality research and enablement for AI, innovation around AI. Can you please speak about AI Art Park? What are you up to in Art Park? Specifically also with respect to Bhasha and Eklavya project, which are relevant to the audience in the learning context. Umakant, off to you. Did we lose him? Okay, all right.
I think we can't hear Umakant.
Umakant, are you muted? We can't hear you. Maybe Umakant.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. All right, go ahead. Yeah, we can see you as well. Thank you.
Okay. So I think one of the interesting thing that Vivek was mentioning, that we do have talent and data, and we could probably create this as we say, the world-class AI, and not only it can look in for things which are probably for 1 billion people in the developing world, but we can do it for the not just for the developed world, but also for the developing world. And I think we have really what we call a supermarket of problems, right? So we have problems of all kinds, and we have the data for that, right?
Yep.
So if I really look at this perspective, that what we need actually is the ecosystem that brings industry, academia, and government together, right, to make that change happen. And that's where we set up Art Park. The idea is that it's a Section 8 company, not for profit. It's promoted by Indian Institute of Science, which is one of the leading institutions in India, and of course supported by AI Foundry. And the idea is that this is the kind of a place where merging of all three streams happen. Academia comes together, industry can come with the problems, and of course we can leverage government to scale solutions up, right? And this has been funded by Department of Science and Technology and of course, Government of Karnataka, $32 million of seed money, and then we
are having difficulty with this.
And this is open for the ecosystem to come together. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. On and off. In between, I think it was.
So
breaking.
coming specifically to is it better now?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So things on the screen then maybe it drops off. So what we see very clearly in learning is that we are going through a massive change, and I think COVID is just accelerating this industrial economy. And by 1975, we had connected up to 1 billion, places by rail, by transportation systems, and that was probably the peak of industrial economy. So we could actually sell what was actually, abundant in one area into another area. Then we started to connect people, and that's where the internet came in. And then we could sell the excess knowledge one person had or organization had to another one. And that's how, Wipro, Infosys, all of this grew. And we got a foothold in that. And I think thanks to, a lot of effort from the people that are there in the panel. Now we are seeing that we are actually starting to enter with AI and robotics. The key differentiator is going to be that we are stepping into this experience economy where we will be creating, sharing, buying experiences, right? Yeah. So in fact, right now, even now, the 90% of the value is in intangibles, right? And that is going to increase to 97, 98%, right? So a lot of this intangible value creation will be driven by very different kind of, learning. So learning essentially will be comprising of 3 critical challenges, right? One is, how do we enable, people, especially kids, to to solve complex problems? Second, how do we enable them to think critically about the thing? And can we actually empower them with imagination so they can actually creatively think about the new solutions that are going to come in, right? So a lot of these jobs that are going to be there in experience economy, we don't know what they are going to be, right? Yeah. So in some sense, what we are looking at, and I think I'm excited about Sunbird as a project because it will actually unearth data about human learning itself. I mean, we actually know very little about human learning, how humans learn, right? How humans collaborate. In fact, this is even driven into sharper focus when we are trying to look at, swarm drones and a whole bunch of collaborative robots, right? And we realize that, hey, we don't even know how humans collaborate, right? And how do they learn from each other, how they learn about new things. So one of the exciting expectations that I have from this whole area is that, and thanks to Sunbird, when we would actually be able to have, so many sessions of data to look at, that probably we'll be able to actually get more knowledge about how humans learn. So to actually concretize that, we are setting up what we call as Project Eklavya. The idea is that can we enable an information-rich environment to act actually as a teacher, and the teacher's role is more of a facilitator, right? Basically unblocking kids when they get stuck into something, right? Rather than carrying the heavy burden of being a teacher, because what we realize is that, because there is so much happening in the world, and the teacher is expected to know everything, they actually stop enjoying that whole process of interaction with the kids, right? And because in India, because of the scale of population that we have, that actually is not a very scalable model itself, right? So we are trying to actually create what we call as education learning lab. It's a live lab model where we create this information-rich environment, and we are leveraging Sunbird as a system as well, as something that is powering the foundation. But then we are bringing in tools from which will be leveraging computer vision, which will be analyzing data which is coming from audio in terms of how kids are reacting to each other. Then we also enabling them to actually experience some of the technologies which are in the digital domain, especially around AI-driven assistance in their native languages, and that's where we are, looking to collaborate with what the work that Vivek is doing. And we also have, creating something called as Bhasha Setu, which is around creating data sets for Indic languages at Art Park. And the idea is that then this model, of these learning labs, we can take it to every single school across the nation, right? And because it's not really dependent upon teachers that much, and teachers actually become facilitators, we can then scale that model, right? And along with this, we're also creating a new concept on remote learning labs, right? So you actually have these robots, which are, probably going to be there in urban areas. And because especially in the rural schools, one of the big problems that we have seen is that they don't have, labs which are actually working or sufficiently stocked, right? So most of the time, they're not actually functional at all. So imagine there is a kid in a school in rural areas, or even sitting at home, he can actually, or she can actually, sign up on a lab, and it can do, experiments, let's say live, right? And the robot actually manipulates it, and they have access to, that as a learning environment. So the idea is of like Eklavya learned by himself, like that, if we can liberate, millions of kids in India to learn by themselves, to actually reach their full potential without, getting bogged down with the concept of economics, caste as a barrier. There are so many barriers that today they have to go through, and having access to pretty much what everybody else has got, right? And I think that is the sure way of actually unlocking the hidden potential. I mean, I'm inspired by what Finland did with its own citizens. They decided, 50 years back that the only resource that they have is human resource. So they said, okay, if we invest in human resource, they will actually, take us to a much larger economy. And I think we also need to look at our human resource in the same way. So this is really inspiring, that we are actually having this conversation about how do we leverage some of these, cutting edge technologies. But what I'm actually really excited about is for us to actually learn more about human learning.
Yeah, thank you. No, it actually, IISc is on the, thankfully for Bangaloreans, right around the corner. But nevertheless, one of the best environment to create cutting edge. And this have to come into public domain. It has to be for us, for our diversity, for our scale. And if you can bridge using technology, bridge the human capabilities, provide access to opportunities through technology, hey, nothing like it. And the fact that you have rallied around the academicians, the young scientists, the funding, and created an institution environment is very fascinating. And definitely, I'm very sure among you itself, we have a bunch of collaboration opportunity right here. So looking forward to that. Thiru, I'll come to you. You have been an early adopter of Sunbird, for sure, as I introduced to everyone else. But what I know of is that you have used Sunbird to set up learning environment for people like us, 250,000, two complexities. One, grown-up people. Second, it's around the globe. So you have, it's not like pure India learning. You have everywhere offices, and you have difference of policies and everything else, right, that go around. But I also know that I've heard about at least Infosys talking about the live enterprise where AI ML techniques used to dramatically shift the human capability. Because at the end of the day, Infosys is all about human capability and actually monetizing human capability. So you have to improve that human capability. Can you speak about how Sunbird Live Enterprise is coming together for you?
Absolutely, Pramod. I think the good thing that we have done 3 years back was getting in touch with you and understanding about Sunbird and the Sunbird capability. And that was a great choice we made, and we got great mentorship from you. Especially, we all are inspired by what you have done with Aadhaar. And our goal was also to figure out how we can create a digital platform that furthers the learning at Infosys. I think that was the mandate given by the leadership, right? So when we looked at Aadhaar, obviously it had powerful infrastructure built for scale, modularized, extensible telemetry, amazing set of things. And the team of Infosys, I think, collaborated well with you to kind of take it within corporate environment, and then we deployed it for our learning. But I think after that, it has been a fantastic journey, right? If you look at the concept of live enterprise, the thought process was, the world of individuals and the living organisms that we keep talking about, we are able to adapt ourselves to the market or future, no matter what the circumstances is very, very nicely. And the inherent nature of that sentient capabilities of individuals is what drives humans to be adaptable, right? And the leadership, especially Nandan, and we get a lot of guidance from you and Sanjay. And the focus was how can we make a company, a large company, be sentient? How can we sense? How can we feel? How can we respond? How can we adapt? And all of it, while we are doing it, how do we augment and amplify the human potential itself? And that is where we have on this journey. We got great learnings from the way we deployed Sunbird within Infosys. We call it legs. And we were able to see the power of what happens when you bring the capabilities of digital platforms with what Vivek said, with so much of data that is collected, and then getting meaningful insights out of that data. And then once you look at the data and then start thinking about them as a concept of nodes and relationship between different nodes, I think then it becomes an extremely fascinating area. So what we have done at Infosys as a live enterprise journey is we started to obviously build this live enterprise built on very important architectural principles. And then we started creating our own digital brain, which connects different data and then creates these relationships. And that actually helps us to create those nudges, create those recommendations for enhancing the potential of the human talent. So purely from learning, what we have seen is when we start making learning fun, learning anytime, anywhere, we were able to kind of leverage the power of telemetry, and we could see a lot of insights. At Infosys, as you rightly said, Pramod, we are all adults learning, and pedagogy by nature is to teach kids, and the kid learning is different to an adult learning. And we used to have a push-based mandated learning at Infosys, which is still happening, obviously, in a lot of schools today. And that was giving us a lot of insights around how people behavior and people routines are. And then we stopped that actually. We stopped that and said, can we make people adapt to this learning by themselves? Just like we talked about live enterprise itself. And can human beings or can employees of a company, large company like Infosys, start becoming addictive or learning by their own choice, by their own interest, based on what the market is telling, what their own needs are, and things like that. And based on that, we have used these AI ML techniques within our learning platform, and we use it for different things. Starting from, that at Infosys we train close to 20,000 students, college graduates in our campus, right? And then the problem is we have been doing it for last 30 years, 35 years, and there's so much of data. And then when we had developed this platform, Lex, and we started imagining saying, can we now predict the learning behavior or learning progress of every individual based on the past data, based on their current performance or current thing. And then we created a prediction model which helps us to tell how students are learning. And then it gives guidance to the educators to tell if someone is deviating, use that to kind of improve, not necessarily use it for negative purposes, but use it for improving the course, but do the course correction of how learners can learn. So that is fantastic pilot we did. Now we are scaling that up. Now, obviously, the thing which everyone likes using AI ML in the world of Amazon and Facebook and everything is the personalized recommendation. Yes, of course. Right? The recommendations part is a no-brainer. We have done that using the data based on what the employee is learning, what their friends are learning, what the location in which they are living or the department they belong to. Using all of that, we have personalized recommendations. That is something that people like. And then we have also ventured into assessments. What happens is you have human bias when you create questions where you say this is simple, this is medium, this is complex. But the problem is once you start looking at the patterns of people responding, the human bias can be eliminated. We have created an AI algorithm and app basically which continuously changes the question classification itself. And then depending on how people are using it or answering, we also know the efficacy of the questions. And that is one thing. So we ventured into assessment. And before COVID, we created a virtual proctoring tool on this platform. And there again, we have used it to kind of sense the anomalies, if someone is doing malpractices and all of that. Obviously, it looks like policing, but it's extremely important to kind of create a discipline. So that is something we ventured in. Okay. Then the additional thing, what we have done is the same pedagogy to andragogy mindset is where we started developing something called adaptive learning. Okay. And what we do in that adaptive learning is looking at the data, looking at what we're doing, the course curriculum itself changes, right? The pattern of what you need to learn versus what level of learning, additional augmentation of learning that needs to happen. Yeah. That is something that we did. And we created a combination of rule-based and AI ML-based adaptive learning, which can help you to kind of learn by yourselves and all of that. Okay. But while we did it, we are pushing, we are not pushing, we are on the journey of making employees learn by themselves, like what Umakant was talking about. Yeah. But what fun is it when you are learning all by yourselves? So we created a virtual AI-based, the virtual assistant, learning assistant, which basically converses with you, which talks with you. So even when you're learning by yourselves, there is always a guide by your side, which uses the data of how you are learning, what your friends are learning, or any help you need, it kind of guides you. So that is something that we built on top of our AI platform that we had. So that's a virtual assistant. And then a few things that we are now exploring and we are working on that is search personalization. Most of the times while we do personalized recommendations, Pramod, the search itself has not been personalized, meaning you search for a keyword and topic and you still get the same results, whether it is me or you searching, right? But can we leverage the power of this live enterprise data digital brain? And when you are searching, can I contextualize your response to you in such a way that you get very effective in
discovery. Discovery is sharper.
Yeah. And then for Infosys, what we have done is we have created a skill-based concept graph, saying if you're learning something, what are the related skills, auto extraction using a lot of this AI ML. I think that is another thing we did. And finally, what we are doing is we are trying to build this conversational AI, this one, because while we have seen a lot of these assistants that I talked about, virtual assistant, Siri and everything, can it maintain the context? Can you continue the context of multiple transactions, not just one transaction where you get a response, but can you do it over a period? Because that is what humans do well, right? Meaning I can remember the context in which we are talking. I can context switch from what you asked me versus what someone else asked me. Right. So we are exploring a little bit on that as well.
Wow.
And the last part is where, again, you have guided us well on this privacy by design, because you talked to me about we are now expanding in multiple countries. While we can do AI ML, the problem is the responsible AI is the big question mark that everyone talks about, saying what data can be used. Are you comfortable using it? We have not seen challenges per se by employees, but there are departments like the privacy and compliance departments, or there are what you call factory unions or employee unions who do not want to use. So we need to be very careful in terms of when we are adopting these AI ML techniques, what is okay, what is not okay? Do you have the consent? Do you kind of adhere to the GDPR kind of compliances? So what we did with Sunbird and the implementation of Lex is we built privacy by design, as you know, and then kind of created it in such a way that employees have an opt-in, opt-out kind of an option, saying this data can be used, or even if it is used, it is anonymized and those kind of things. So great learning journey. We still have a lot to do.
Yeah. And I also know that I think there was a question, I'll just, because of the time, I know that you are also open sourcing. There is a project called Eagle on GitHub, which is your variant of Sunbird that you have decided to contribute back. So thank you for doing that. People can look for Infosys organization and Project Eagle under that. But I want to come back to Soma. Soma, you were the original architect of AI, all of AI in EkStep. And being a natural teacher, the two questions I have for you. One, how do you see AI in learning? Because you come from that background, teaching, learning, specifically in school context and educational context, especially with smaller children and so on. Second question, you actually architected a set of tools into Sunbird. You know, I remember some great experimentation developer conference that you conducted where people were innovating robots and so on. Can you speak a little bit to the audience on what is already available as framework in Sunbird?
Sure. No, certainly, I think this is way back in 2000, particularly. Now, before I begin, thanks to Dr. Pramod and the entire EkStep team. I see it's very good to see all the familiar faces. I owe my current thinking to the training that I got while I was at EkStep. So way back in 2018, when we are figuring out the developer conference, right, we took a connected classroom experience. So if you look at EkStep fundamental, right, there is a supply of content, there is a distribution channel, and there is a consumption or the demand side, right? So definitely I can play, all the way from the supply all the way to the to catering to the demand side of it. So at EkStep, especially, we built two things. One is the ML infrastructure and ML assets. So what I mean by ML infrastructure is at around 2017, 2018 times, there are no platforms like Qflow or MLflow that were making the job of a data scientist easy. So if I look back, I think, so we were definitely early in creating such kind of platforms as a part of the Sunbird's overarching open digital infrastructure. In this case, it's for ML. Yeah. So with using that kind of frameworks, you can build, fork, create, edit models. That was the idea. On the ML asset side, so if you look at fundamental, right, EkStep took the stance that we'll be energizing the textbooks and the QR codes or the anchor points, like landmarks, both literal and figuratively. So if you want to help students discover content, I think a logical first step is to make sure that this content is represented, is available in the form in the form that the machine can understand and process. So which we called at the time, it's called the digital textbook or the digital version of the physical textbook, meaning you have the knowledge graph, which represents, let's say, the TOC is a layman's taxonomy of a textbook, how the concepts are organized. Then against which you ingest the textbook, right? So with which content discovery becomes possibility. Basically QR scan becomes the initiation point. Yep. With which you can go from English to English, English to Kannada, and it allows you to seamlessly move across different curricula, different frameworks, right? And we were using at the time the National Curriculum Framework as a bridge taxonomy. But with the ML assets kind of framework that we built, it allows you to seamlessly go without necessarily having a language translation layer. I think it's kind of a double whammy. In some sense, it obviates the need for explicit language translation, but it also allows you to take this parallel corpora to train language models down the line. I think that's what I think we began solving at the time. Basically, I think it allowed us to solve the access to the digital content problem in the first place. That's the contribution part. Correct. In terms of where I can basically help, definitely on the three legs. Specifically, I think that it's a great hearing Thiru, Vivek on, for example, conversational AI, chatbots, right? So as a teacher and as a student of, let's say, calculus and in maths in general, right? I see particularly the benefit of AI is in solvers. In fact, one of the precursors to using AI in this domain is basically theorem proving, right? So let's say I can, and if you ask Wolfram alpha, an integral 0 to 2 pi cos theta by 12 minus 13 sine theta, right? It'll give you pi by 9, which is magical. And there's a lot of technology behind it. Same is the case with MATLAB's symbolic toolbox. So I think that's the first place. And if you want to help student understand, break the problem into its conceptual part, it goes very well with the QML representation, right? You break down, you decompose the question and recompose so that it becomes a stepwise answer that contributes to adaptive assistance for the student. You can go back to question to the answer, or you can take the individual parts and get assistance from the system. That's one great place where I think it's a classical AI is also proven in that area. And both like neural Turing machines, neural theorem provers, even though kind of fancy, but I think there is a scope for research. Okay. That's definitely one side. And the counterpart of that in non-math curricula is basically natural language understanding. Basically reading comprehension, textual alignment, and it's helpful both in content creation, like we did proof of concept during the DevCon, right? You can create questions given a paragraph, given a textbook, right? Given you scan a QR code, you can generate contextual questions. This actually makes contextual AI possible. The same way, just with it's also connects well with the physical concept that you're proposing, right? Meaning physically, I know where the learner is. The QR code is actually becoming a landmark. It's like a GPS coordinate of the learner physically. Once you map the knowledge tracing, right, in the knowledge graph equivalent, right, that's a cognitively where the student is. And now defining learning is precisely possible. It's just like going from point A to point B, both in the QR code landscape, in the textbook where you are, as well as in the knowledge graph parlance. And when we looked at the PISA solving the problem, right, we also looked at how to define learning outcomes. If learning is about delivering on learning outcomes, how do you define learning outcomes? How do you enable? I think it's definitely possible with the ontology-driven approach that you're taking. Basically, action verbs is basically what a student can demonstrate. Therefore, learning outcomes can precisely be defined against knowledge graph. And if the content is rightly tagged with the right metadata and with the right telemetry, right, it's entirely possible to deliver on the learning outcomes. Not only you're solving the access to the learning resources, but also not exactly promise, but at least tracking the learning outcome is possible.
That's wonderful. Actually, that's very, very promising. And always, today's Ramanujan's day, so pi by 9 could not have been more apt. But hopefully, AI is a loaded subject. It is worrisome to many people. The lack of, it's not algorithmic, nobody knows what it is, like a black box. So one question, I know that literally probably less than a minute left. So I'm going to ask, a quick question to all of you. So Soma, I'll start with you. What worries you about AI?
At least in the context of learning, lack of regulatory compliance. Basically, it's a difficult problem to solve, not just from a policy standpoint, but also from the AI science side of it, right? Because there is no consensus on what exactly explainability means, what exactly fairness means. That's not kind of still the research community is still debating about
fairness, right? Explainability.
Yeah. The second worry I have is basically, if there is only one model that is serving across, right, then only one teacher is basically amplifying. Either the limitations or advantages are simply amplified. So how do you? It goes to the first principle, architectural principle, right? Not uniform, but unified. So how do you let competing pedagogies exist and then let them thrive on the platform? I think these two are the important challenges I see here.
Thiru, what are you losing? So what worries you about it?
I think the same as what Soma said. I think still, I think there's a lot of confusion around explainability and what is okay, not okay. As I said, Pramod, in some cases we have some kind of, especially when we take to our clients, the concerns around what employee unions basically think about it. And then a lot of, I think that we need to demystify the power and this thing, because other than that, I think totally technology, I think that is not an issue, to be frank.
Okay. And Umakant, what would be your answer?
So I think two things actually. One is that I think the technology's ability to scale our biases. I mean, we are all, have biases inbuilt in us, right? I think, and that's what actually makes us unique. But AI's ability to scale biases is challenging, and that's why I think we need to think inclusive first. AI in some sense, right? Because that way the bias will actually be in check, right? The second thing is that, I'm more worried about natural stupidity than artificial intelligence.
Yeah. So Vivek.
So I think I'll take a slightly different tack, because I think a lot of people have talked about bias and other things. I think and I pick up on the word inclusive that Umakant had used, but I think inclusive is that there will be the AI haves and the AI have-nots. And basically, we have to be solving the problems. AI can be used for solving all kinds of problems. And AI is used to solve the problems for which data sets exist. That's the cheap thing to solve. And I think that if you are we have to solve the problems of everybody with AI, because there are capabilities. And because the world, there is a danger of those people who are dramatically improving their efficiency because they're leveraging AI, and those who don't. And that divide is very important. That before we worry about bias in other ways, exclusion from AI is what I'm worried about. That, you know, as a biggest thing, you know, the bias can be solved. I think that, you know, while I do agree that AI will tends to magnify biases and tends to choose winners sometimes, the fact of the matter is, you know, I think that in the end, humans have enough biases that we should be looking. But I think that the access to this technology to everybody is what my concern.
Wonderfully said. And I think that's a great place to end with. I think first let's bridge the haves and have-not, the gap between the people who have it, because the same people would leverage technology and go faster ahead. More children, those children will go even faster. So we must ensure it's commoditized, available, everyone can be empowered with it. And of course, on the way, solve ethics around it, explainability around it, auditability around it, and so on. I think it is a journey and human beings have to go through it. We have gone through before, and hopefully we will go through it correctly. Thank you, Vivek, Umakant, Thiru, and Soma. Wonderful to have all of you. I'm very sure people have enjoyed. And thank you for answering some of the questions. If you can stay back and answer a few more questions, that's okay. But we will, if we don't find some of the answers, we might ping you again and get the answer so that we can publish all questions and answers as FAQs as well after the channel, okay? After the presentation. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thanks, Pramod.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Pramod.